A really short story from a group of players I adopted because of their former DM. My girlfriend has a co-worker who got interested in D&D and his friend group decided that they want to play. One of them said that he could DM, and after a few weeks of planning, he sent a bill into the group chat used for organizing the game. He put everything he bought in there. Every source book from D&D Beyond, a few pre-painted miniatures, and table materials, adding up to around €1,000. The funny thing is that he also gave himself a pay rate for his time and calculated 421 hours of work, which added up to €15,787. He expected everyone to pay him without even telling them that they should pay him in advance. It is still way too much, even if you did say something, but asking for €15,000 out of the blue is insane. My girlfriend told me about the situation, and they are going to play a game with me as their DM for the price of... please bring snacks. I understand that paid D&D is a thing that a lot of people like, but I can't say that I understand springing a 15 grand bill on somebody. Can't say I understand that at all. I'll try to keep this as brief as possible. It's a story I found funny and was encouraged to share it. Sorry if it's too long. In 2021, I started DMing a Curse of Strahd inspired horror story with friends. I kept it a little less brutal, like Pulp Cthulhu, because I wanted to create a story where my players investigated strange phenomenon while trying to unravel a bigger conspiracy/plot. First chapter was done, everyone enjoyed it, and we're looking forward to the next one. By that time, I had made a new friend, which I'll call Mary, that had never played TTRPGs before, but she was interested, so I thought it was a good idea to introduce her to the game. I explained it was not meant to be an action story, more of an investigative one. Our story takes place in Japan. We're a pretty weeby group ourselves, but every character was a normal person, and the most weeby things were just the characters' names. I don't know if this made Mary feel uncomfortable in making the most over-the-top character ever. The character Mary created was just like herself, except for the name. Same appearance, same age, same hobbies, etc. The key difference is that her character had different colored eyes, and was next in line of a family of super-powered exorcists that had a necklace with a mysterious monster-slaying power that was passed through the generations. I told her to tune it down a little about the super-powered exorcists and stuff, and although she was pretty annoyed, they ended up being only normal investigators like the other players. In the next session, a new mystery is revealed, and the players start investigating and interacting with the new protagonist. Everything went fine. Some days after the session was over, Mary came to me on Discord DMs and said that she was excited to see her different colored eyes will unleash their secret power. Again, I told her that this was not the kind of story we were playing, and she argued with me that because the other players had more experience, she should have something powerful to counterbalance it. After some discussion, I proposed to her that maybe she should leave the group and wait until we've played a high fantasy setting or something different like that. She said she would like to keep playing this one and wouldn't make any trouble. Until the very next day. Again, on Discord DMs, Mary told me she had a conversation with one of her friends about how she played her first D&D session and really enjoyed it, and then, without asking me, said that this friend of hers will come to the next session to play with us. I was already a little bummed out, but tried to politely explain that she shouldn't be inviting people without contacting me. That is when she lost it. She started complaining about the lore of the campaign, how boring it was that no one had any powers, and she sent me the idea she had with her friend, which she claimed would improve our setting. Her friend's backstory was that he was a symbiote that came from outer space. They would find each other and she would become literally venom. Again, I tried one last time explaining that this was not how our campaign was going to go and that she could leave if she didn't like it. Before leaving, she just crapped on all of our chats, claiming it was just Scooby-Doo with generic characters and nothing special, although she was only there for one session, and then ended up not talking to me ever again. I don't know if I should feel sad I lost a friend, or glad I got rid of a childish 25-year-old woman. Oof, probably the latter. This OP brings up something that I might want to talk about in the future, but look, there's nothing wrong with leaving a TTRPG game that you're not enjoying to find a different TTRPG game. It's not something that should be shamed or looked down upon, and I see that a lot for some reason. People thinking that leaving a group is like giving up, but it's not. Look, D&D or any TTRPG takes a lot out of you. It's 4 hours a week a lot of the time, and look, it's a lot of time to spend on something that you're just not enjoying. I do not know why this lady insisted on staying in this campaign and trying to transform it into something different, when there are tons of people out there who would be happy to run a high-powered fantasy game for her. Don't waste your time and ruin someone else's game just because you want to morph it into something you like. Find a different game. There are so many out there, and you're bound to find one that suits your needs. This story happened about 2 years back. I was invited alongside a few other people on a West Marches server to play in another resident of that server's homebrew campaign that he was putting together. I eagerly accept, and I begin playing with other people from the server whom I had at least some experience with even before joining on the original West Marches server. Everyone made relatively well-adjusted characters, but the problem player of the story was Edge. Edge was your typical dark, brooding tiefling rogue with a tragic backstory that he would constantly refer to but never talk about when asked about it, which wouldn't be so bad if he didn't so obnoxiously bring up said tragic backstory every session. It was honestly the sort of edgelord character you hear about but never think you'd actually encounter. The other important character in this story is the other tiefling of the party, a bubbly tiefling bard. She too, like Edge, had a dark backstory where her character had faced ostracization and bullying by her noble father, but had overcome it and chose to see the good in life rather than letting the bad she'd faced sour her. For my own part, I was playing an optimistic human fighter who cared deeply for his comrades and always sought to do the right thing where he could. Both she and I had good rapport in and out of character, and our characters bounced off of each other really well. The campaign goes smoothly, albeit with Edge still being obnoxiously edgy all the time, and at one point we encounter Bard's noble father, who was hosting a tournament. After bullying Bard and making several remarks pertaining to her infernal heritage, my character decides to enter the tournament to beat her father, managing to unhorse him during a joust and humiliate him at his own tournament. Following this, Bard messages me saying that her character would really admire how my fighter stood up for her and that no one else had really done that for her character, and asked me if I'd feel comfortable with our characters entering into a relationship. Now, I'm not usually a fan of romance in the games I run or play, as it can be quite awkward and uncomfortable. This was the one exception, however, as the romance my fighter had with Bard felt organic and not awkward at all, which was further helped by the good rapport she and I already had with each other out of character. Following this, Edge's behavior begins to get worse, even worse, and he becomes noticeably more terse in-game, going off on his own, constantly saying that his character needs to be alone, and then getting upset that no one would follow him when he wants to be alone to see what was up, which again, he brought on himself by knocking us back all the times we try to roleplay with him. Additionally, in combat, his character would stick close to Bard instead of trying to solo monsters to protect her, which only made these fights harder because she was far from the front lines, and he wasn't doing as much damage as he was before. After a few weeks of this, Edge invites Bard and myself to join him in a secret voice chat. We do so, and the first thing that comes out of his mouth is that he'd called the meeting to talk about our character's awful and out of character behavior. We were both confused about what he meant by this, and he danced around the subject for a bit before outright stating to Bard, "Your character should be dating mine, not his." According to Edge, since both he and Bard were playing tieflings and they both had dark pasts, it would make sense, and they both would be interested in one another, and that Bard and myself had clearly missed all the setup he'd been putting down for her. I have literally no idea what he was talking about, unless he thought brooding and going off on his own all the time to be alone was a substitute for flirting? He then finishes by saying that he's willing to give you both a second chance, and that this was a role-playing game and we ought to be role-playing our characters correctly. I had to mute myself at this point because I was laughing my ass off at the sheer audacity, self-entitlement, and thirstiness of Edge, while Bard calmly told him that her character was romantically interested in my fighter because he was a good-natured guy who stuck by his friends through thick and thin and didn't let bad things get to him, while Edge was miserable all the time and was always feeling sorry for himself. Of course, she'd want to date the character who actually made her character happy to be around. Finally, she finishes off by saying that neither of us owed him an explanation at all, and that we could roleplay our characters however we wanted, and that if he didn't like it, he could leave whenever he liked. We both left the call and told the DM what happened, while Edge posts a message on the server saying how hurt and sad he was that we
couldn't be adults about this, and clearly weren't taking the game seriously.
and then left the server. This would have been the end of it until Bard and I got booted from the original West Marches server by the mods for bringing drama into the group. We later learned that Edge had spun things so that it sounded as though we were flaunting our in-character romance and bullied him out of the group when he left of his own volition. After complaining to one of the mods about this, who was his friend, we were booted from the group. There is something of a happy ending though. After finding out what happened from us both, our DM and the rest of the party left the West Marches server, but not until after the DM set the record straight to the entire server and explained just how crappy Edge had been and what had really happened. The resulting fallout had the mod that kicked us, as well as Edge, kicked from the server, and a bunch of other people leaving as well, rendering the server a shell of its former self. I'm not even sure if it's still up. As for Bard and my fighter, they eventually got married and raised a family together in a nice, happy household and a nice, happy life. TLDR, Edgelord gets jealous of an in-game relationship and demands we break it up for proper role-playing. Edge is obviously bad here. You should never be that fed up with an in-game relationship. If people are having fun, people are having fun. As long as the group is still comfortable, we're good. But you shouldn't be so thirsty that you need to ruin an in-game relationship and demand that a girl's character go out with you to fulfill some kind of weird need that I do not understand. On top of that, the mods of the server are the real horror story, at least that one mod. This is one risk, a minor risk usually, but a major one sometimes, this being an example of the latter, where a mod can really ruin a game for you. That is just an unfortunate truth when you're playing online, but don't let it dissuade you from playing through Discord or through Roll20 or through any sort of online group finder. You can find awesome, amazing groups and awesome, amazing friends. Just be aware that you may also find some not so awesome people as well. Once upon a time, when I was doing study abroad in college, I joined a new school's tabletop society. I'd been playing D&D and Pathfinder for nearly a decade, so I thought this would be a good way to make some friends. I wasn't the only girl in the club, but there certainly weren't a lot of us, and I ended up being the only girl in the regular group I played with. Most of the dudes were your stereotypical awkward nerd type, but they were good guys, and after we started playing and they saw I knew what I was doing, they accepted me as one of them. The club met 3 times a week, and we'd play a TTRPG until the wee hours of the morning. I still have great memories of that year, and the people I hung out with. And then there's that guy. That guy played a goblin alchemist. There were a lot of us at the table, so things could get pretty chaotic pretty fast, but we still managed to build bonds between our characters. That guy, at first, was really friendly and outgoing, and his characters were really funny. Goblin Alchemist especially would always turn the session on its head, which was fine because none of us were taking it that seriously anyway. He attached himself to my fighter character pretty quickly. I was cool with that because Alchemist player seemed chill, and we had a comfortable dynamic within the group. I met with these guys 3 days a week for months. We really got to know each other. That guy and I became good friends. We even started to hang out outside club meetings because I was a foreigner and he offered to show me around the city. I never felt weird or awkward around him. Until one day, 3 months before I am set to fly home, that guy confesses to me that he had feelings for me and wanted to be in a relationship. You need to know, reader, for context, I am one of the most oblivious people on the planet. Any and all signals that this was coming went totally over my head. I was blindsided and apologetic because I didn't feel the same way. I tried to let him down easy. I told him that I thought he was a great person, but I wasn't really looking for a relationship, especially since I was going to fly back home to my country in a pretty short span of time. It didn't make sense to me to start something I knew would have to stop. He was upset, which I understood, and I told him I valued our friendship and offered to give him space. He said no, it was okay. Obviously, he needs some time, but he didn't want me to feel like I couldn't hang out with our other friends. It would be fine. It was not fine. At first, club meetings were a little awkward because his character wasn't buddying up with mine like he usually did. I figured that would happen, and I wasn't surprised by it, so I tried to just go on like normal. Over time, Alchemist player became more animated again, and started getting back into our old shenanigans of sowing Pathfinder chaos. And then, things started getting uncomfy. My character rescued a young elf from a bad situation. It's very silly, and I will just skip. And the DM allowed me to bring the elf along as sort of my sidekick. Alchemist insisted on interacting with the elf as well, treating him very affectionately and insisting that our characters and mine were co-parenting the NPC. No one seemed to take this very seriously, so I didn't either. In-game, relationships don't reflect real-life ones after all. But then Alchemist started to get very possessive of my character, and the player started texting me late at night on nights we were not playing. He'd say he missed me, or talk about how sad he was that I didn't want to date him, and how badly it was affecting his mental health. I was smart enough to know he was trying to guilt me into going out with him, but apparently too stupid to cut him out of my life. Regardless, I didn't bite, and told him that if his mental health was really that bad, he should go speak to a therapist or a counselor. Our school even had some on staff, but that wasn't the answer he wanted, so he would always back off until a few days later, where he'd text me again, and we'd go through the whole song and dance once more. At club meetings, I tried to stay casual because I didn't want to drag all the other guys in the group in on the drama. We were all adults. We could be friendly and mature around each other, right? As far as I knew, none of them were even aware of what that guy was saying to me behind the scenes. Then, one fateful night, the paradigm was shifted. Good transition. I like that. Anyway, am I gonna keep that in? I'll keep that in. Another guy in the group, we'll call him Rogue, came over to our table before the game started when everyone was just chatting and goofing off. Rogue was probably one of the only humans more blind to non-verbal cues than I was. One of his characters was literally poisoned by another member of the party who poured the poison in his drink right in front of him, but the player was playing a phone game at the time and wasn't paying attention. Anyway, Rogue comes over to the table and slides right on up to the alchemist, and just loud enough for all to hear, says, "Hey, I heard you've got a crush on the redhead in the club." The table went dead silent. There were only 2 redheads in the club, one of which, of course, was me. To be fair, the only other was a very sweet, very pretty girl who it could have been. But I could tell from the blissfully unaware look on Rogue's face that his head was empty of all thoughts and implications of what he had just said. However, I could also tell that every other member of the group present knew exactly who the alchemist had a crush on. I could also tell that none of them knew I was aware of it. It was painfully awkward, and in a strange way, it was kind of funny. Alchemist somehow managed to not answer Rogue's question, and everyone else rushed to start the game, so they had an excuse to not talk about it. But somehow that moment cracked open Pandora's box for cringy behavior. Alchemist's possessiveness started to bleed out of character. While that guy was still chipper and outgoing to everyone else, there was now a sharper edge to his jokes. He started being a dick to other guys I was friends with, but he always played it off like it was a joke. The texts about how I was ruining his life by not dating him were still coming fast and strong. Eventually, even my idiotic self had enough. I told him firmly that I was never going to be in a relationship with him, and his behavior made it so I didn't even want to remain friends with him. Should I have continued going back to games with him after that? No, probably not, but the siren song, friendship, and TTRPGs, well, it was far too strong. The breaking point came one literal dark and stormy night. We were taking a pizza break from the game, and we're all just goofing off. I was talking to the orc barbarian, I think commiserating that he would have to ride a bike back in all this rain. I made some joke, I don't remember what about, but that guy's loud and manic laughter will be forever imprinted onto my brain. I legitimately didn't recognize him when I looked at his face. His smile was so weird and his eyes were so bugged out, still laughing like it was a joke. He said that I would probably like him more if he skinned Barbarian alive and wore his skin like a suit? I did not know what to say to that. I don't think anyone knew what to say to that. Rogue, bless him, looked up from his phone and asked if there was any pizza left. That night, I noped out of the game early, and I was looking over my shoulder the whole bus ride back to my dorm. I blocked that guy's number and told DM I was not coming back to any game he was playing in. DM said, "Yeah, that's fair." Thankfully for me, that guy stopped coming around to club meetings as much after that. My game nights went from 3 to 2 a week, which was unfortunate, but not long after the incident, the school year ended, and I flew back home. Over time, I lost touch with my friends from the tabletop club, but thankfully, last I heard, no one had been turned into a skin suit. Sad to say that this isn't the first time something like this has happened to me, but it was by far the most arranged. TLDR, a sort of chaotic but friendly fellow player admits he has a crush on me, and after getting rejected, threatens to go Buffalo Bill on another player to win my affections. I have nothing. I'm gonna be honest with you guys, I have no idea how to even respond to that story. Look, that guy here is absolutely crazy. I do not know how anyone can believe that that is a viable method of accomplishing a healthy relationship dynamic. Buffalo Bill is the antagonist of Silence of the Lambs. He's the bad guy. I mean, I don't even understand. You look at Silence of the Lambs and take away the message that, yes, in this film, they are endorsing the horrible serial killer in this movie. He is definitely somebody I should take inspiration from when running my life. Yes, this is healthy. I know that all of us think, yes, I would absolutely leave a D&D group if somebody's acting crappy to me, but honestly, I've been there. I've run games with crappy people in it, been in groups with crappy people, and it's hard. It is. It's harder than it seems when you're just reading stories. Actually being there is a totally different ballgame. So I don't blame OP here, but even though it's going to be difficult, yeah, leave games with crazies, because crazies probably aren't going to get any less crazy over the course of your game. The worst guys make the longest lasting impressions. At least they do when you don't have any of the best people around to make big, loud impressions on our memories as well. I had to remove a friend, we'll call him Player 1, from my group, I want to say about a year ago. He was actually the one who had talked me into DMing, got a few other people on board to join us, etc. But he was terrible about not showing up, about telling us he would be there, and then being completely out of touch if we waited for him. He'd get a phone call and he'd say he'd be right back, and then not return to message us. He'd improve, and then in a big dramatic moment that centered on his character, he would just disappear again. He would call and the next day or the day after apologize and ask me to pass a message to the group we both played with on the second day as to whether or not he would be there or not be there. I finally asked him to step away. On top of being unreliable, the disrespect of asking me to pass on the basic communication he could afford to his other group, but not to me, was too much, and the other players were as annoyed as I was by his instability. When I explained, he said he understood, and he wasn't hurt, and I told him of course he's hurt, and he's allowed to be hurt. Don't think you have to pretend that you're not hurt. We had a talk, he disappeared outside text messages in a few weeks, and then we'd talk again intermittently. I told him, and I let him know that after a few months, that if he felt like he could communicate effectively and make the commitment of playing, that he would be welcome to rejoin us. He did eventually, and has been as consistent as you expect, both with communication and attendance. A few months after he rejoined us, I had to remove another player. I originally started out with just a conversation about treating the other people at the table with respect, but this guy stopped showing up on time and was distracted, high, and or drunk most of the time, and was incredibly rude if he didn't get his way, arguing about rules more often than not. On a night where he didn't show up, I did a side quest with 3 players. It was a huge amount of fun, but we had a discussion at the end about the parts that didn't go well, and the 4 of us agreed I was going to send out a message covering those topics. I had to reformat my phone recently, or I'd share the exact message. But it was basically, hey, I know we're all big fans of the game and we had a great time last night, but let's try to keep the rules discussions during the game to a minimum, and remember, while you want to stay true to your character, remember that the rest of us characters need to have a reason to want to hang out with yours. Looking forward to the next session. Player 2 went off, sent a series of messages to the group chat, starting with saying, "If you ever made a ruling that was fun in your life, then people wouldn't argue with you." And it went downhill from there. Another group member commented that this seemed like maybe he needed to have his private talk with the DM, and another commented on that it wasn't fun to listen to him verbally abuse said DM, aka me, in or out of session. Player 2 apologized for the group message and then sent me a stream of abuse via a private text messages, enumerating his many grievances. Top of the list, he never showed for session 0. I scheduled a second one specifically to accommodate him, and he still didn't show up. But he was still upset that we started at level 1 instead of 3. Didn't say anything up until the 3rd session, and basically said that neither he nor his girlfriend would show up to the game if we didn't level up to level 3 immediately. When I responded that I was happy to talk with him out of game about these decisions, but wasn't going to address any game details unless we could communicate respectfully, he just doubled down and somehow got even worse. I responded at this point, letting him know that he wasn't welcome back at my table at this time, but that I'd still communicate with him if he would just stop. He then said he shouldn't have to stop because I couldn't handle him being extra. And well, it went even more downhill from there. When I told the group that I'd asked him to step away, I got mostly thank God responses, and I would have to leave if he stayed responses. Except from the late player from above. The late player asked if I was okay with it, and then messaged the dick player as a friend to try to be there for him, and thinking that down the road in the conversation, if it all went well, he could remind this player that I was terribly forgiving, and he'd probably be welcome back if his behavior changed. For the late player's trouble, he got a bunch of abuse for it. I got some more, including that he hoped I'd fall apart physically, push everyone away from me so I wouldn't feel like a burden, and die alone and unloved as I deserved. I have some serious mental health issues, and we talked about many things as friends. This was targeted for me. Maximum effort. He then told the group at large that he hoped we fell apart, and each of us died in a separate ditch somewhere, since we were all so low, and he had no idea what it meant to be a friend. I particularly liked the part where he tried to maintain the high ground while fireballing his own position. Each of us had to block his number individually, had to remove and block him from all social media sites we used in common. He used someone else's phone to keep texting me and the late player. Player finally had an attorney send him a letter, and only then did he stop. Our group is currently going strong on our way to rescue the late player's family from fungal zombie infestation. TLDR, I've had someone leave my table and return to it with such grace that I am moved to tell you about him. And someone else leave my table in such a way that the first one had to threaten him with a lawyer to get him to stop harassing me. I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think this is the first time that on this channel a lawyer has been called to repress that guy's nonsense, and while perhaps it may be overkill, it is about as efficient as you would think, aka incredibly efficient. One of them is an instigator and a dick who's treating other people like crap, and the other is late a lot and kind of flaky. I understand that for some people, in the latter category, stuff happens, and open communication is important, but I don't think that's nearly as bad as somebody who is at the game and consciously choosing to act crappy to other people. Can people like that improve? Absolutely. People can change. But they are two different categories. One is just late and probably just happenstance. The other is somebody choosing to act like that around your table. Not saying instigators like Player 2 are unsavable. They can absolutely get better. But I'm just saying that those are two different categories, and sometimes a good solid kick out of the group is one of the only ways to really save it from getting ruined by an instigator. Quite the episode, and I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you want to let me know, then please do hit that like button. If you want to see more of my content, we also have a Tabletop Tavern Tip series where I give lots of D&D advice, almost 50 episodes worth of it, so check that out if you're interested, and also subscribe to Crispy's Tavern. While you're at it, we post videos every few days covering Dungeons & Dragons. And finally, if you want to leave your own stories or thoughts, go down to the comments down below. If you can't think of a comment, leave the comment wannabe Bill to reference the stories and to let me know you made it to the end of the video. In essence, like, comment, subscribe. I will see you all next time. Farewell.